Today is Friday, Isur Chag, Shavuos, Ches Sivan Tovshin Ayin Gimel. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim Tovshin Yud Aleph Tovshin Yud Beis. We are on page Kuf Chof Beis in the Maimer Tzav of Shabbos Pashas Pinchas Mevorchem HaChedesh Menachem Tovshin Yud Aleph, and we are up to Eis Hey, chapter 5. We are learning about Karbonos. Why is the actual physical bringing of a sacrificial offering so central to Avodas Hashem, serving Hashem, to the extent that this is also what we aspire to with the coming of Mashiach. So the Rebbe explained, Roza the Kurban Eila, Roza the Insof. The secret of the carbon reaches all the way up to the secret of God's very essence, and that the idea is to draw it down into the physical world, draw down God's very essence into the physical world. God desired to have a dwelling place for himself in this physical, in the lowest realms, a dwelling place for himself. The idea of drawing down the very essence of Hashem, into the lowest realms, and that is highlighted most profoundly in a korban, in a sacrificial offering, which is a physical animal being offered up to Hashem. And the Rebbe explained that there are three types of karbanos, sacrificial offerings, related to three distinct time periods in our history. There is sacrificial offerings as it relates to the time that Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden. There are sacrificial offerings, the concept of bringing karbanos during the time of the Beis HaMikdash, the first and second temple. And then there is how the concept of sacrificial offerings when Mashiach will come. And each one of them is distinct. In the time of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, since there was no ra, there was no bad, there was no evil in Gan Eden, what was the point in the Garden of Eden? So what was the point of bringing sacrificial offerings? The idea of bringing a sacrificial offering there was to draw down godliness into the world. During the time of the first and second temple, the concept of bringing karbonos, sacrificial offerings, in addition to drawing down godliness into the world, it was done in a mode of milchama, waging war, as it were, with those elements that oppose kedusha, that oppose godliness and holiness, avodas habirurim, refining the environment around us, which is a mix of the good and the bad. Of course, we're talking about the inner dimension, not only the physical dimension of karbonos, but also what the carbon represents in terms of its inner and more spiritual dimension. Then there is the idea of bringing karbonos when Mashiach comes. Karbonos, sacrificial offerings when Mashiach comes, then too, there will be no bad, as it were. Right? The spirit of impurity will be removed from the face of the earth. So then too, offering karbonos, sacrificial offerings to Hashem, will also be in the mode of drawing down godliness into the world. If that's the case, what is the difference between sacrificial offerings when Mashiach will come and sacrificial offerings as they were in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve? That's where we're up to, and that's the question that Rebbe addresses now in chapter 5 on page Kuf Chav Beis. However, the main completeness concerning sacrificial offerings is going to be in the time to come. When will the concept, the idea of bringing sacrificial offerings be in its fullness, in its full state of completeness? That will be in the time to come when Mashiach comes. Then the sacrificial offerings will be at a higher level, even over and above sacrificial offerings as they were in the Garden of Eden. How? So the Rebbe goes and enumerates. In more detail, Hine bekarbonos ksiv lachmi leishai tishmeru. Concerning karbonos, there are three expressions that the pasuk uses. As korbani, my sacrificial offering, lachmi, my bread, liishai, to my fire offerings, tishmiru, you shall keep, you should guard. These three words, these three descriptions, shehem gimel inyanim, they are three distinct concepts. Lachmi, hu hadover hanikrav. There are three components, distinct components related to karbonos. Lachmi, my bread, hu hadover hanikrav, that is actually the offering itself, that which is being offered. Tishmiru, you shall keep. Koi al ha'adam ha'makriv, that refers to the person who offers up the korban. The ishai, hu inyan eishel ha'maylam, my fire is a reference to the fire from above, as mentioned before, a fire from above that used to come down and consume the karbonos, the fire, the offerings. V'hainu, what does that mean? Shelefi oifen ha'makriv v'hanikrav kach tiyeh hamshacha shel ha'mayla. Right? Lachmi tishmeru, according to the mode of the one that offers the korban and that which is being offered up, that directly impacts the type of drawing down from above that takes place. Which means that there are levels. And in the time to come, all these three aspects, these three components will be in their fullness, in their state of completeness. And therefore, the ultimate completeness of sacrificial offerings will be when Mashiach comes. To explain this. The concept of karbonos, the idea of karbonos, sacrificial offerings, in the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, that was before the Torah was given. Right? Because the Torah was given in the year 2448, and this was 2,448 years prior to that. What was the difference between before Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, and after the giving of the Torah? Sha'oz, during the time of Adam and Eve, as it was before the giving of the Torah, there was the decree that the men of Rome should not descend to Syria, and the people of Syria should not go up to Rome. This is a reference, this is a language of a mashal, a parable that is brought concerning Matan Torah, concerning the giving of the Torah. It says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, God descended onto Mount Sinai. So the question is asked, what does it mean God descended on Mount Sinai? What, he had to come from someplace else to come down to Mount Sinai? God is everywhere. Hashem is everywhere. So the Medrash says it's a mashal. It brings a parable of a king who was a king over a number of locations, including Rome and Syria, Rome and Syria. And he made a decree that the people from one place should not go to another place, and the people from the other place shouldn't go to the first place. So the people of Rome should not descend to Syria, and the people of Syria should not go up to Rome. Right? These are references to the upper realms and the lower realms, the godly and the mundane. There was a decree. They didn't mix. Right?
Why they didn't mix? The whole effort is to bring Hashem.
Wait, that's before Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah. There was a chasm. When Hashem gave the Torah, that's what he did. He took away the decree. He said, now I'm giving the right, not only the right, the fusion of strength, I'm giving the ability for the upper and the lower to fuse. That's the concept of Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, God, and he said, I will start the process. I will descend onto Mount Sinai, which is the symbol is that the upper realms is coming down to fuse with the lower realms. And then Umesha Amar Alei, and to Moses he said, you come up to the mountain. That's the reference of the lower realms coming up to the higher realms. Right? So before Matan Torah there was this chasm. What does it mean in the deeper sense? We know that the mitzvahs that were performed before Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah, did not have the permanence of the mitzvahs that are performed after Matan Torah, after the giving of the Torah. Although our forefathers fulfilled the entire Torah before it was given, it did not permanently draw down the godliness into this world in a permanent state. It was transient. After Matan Torah, when God said, okay, the upper realms and the lower realms could fuse, that is when a mitzvah now has the ability to draw down the godliness into this world in a permanent state, in a permanent way.
But we revere our forefathers to such an extent And now you're saying that their mitzvahs or their connection was temporary.
Correct.
But every day we say the Amidah, we refer to the permanence of our forefathers.
Well, the forefathers were certainly permanent, and their Avodas Hashem their connection to Hashem was permanent, but the effect that it had on the world was not permanent. It was a preparation.
But we still refer to them every day.
Correct. It's not.
So how can you say they're not permanent?
It's not that they're not permanent. Their actions.
Their effect is, you're saying it's not permanent.
The effect of what they did was to prepare the world for the event of giving the Torah. Without their Avodas Hashem, without them serving Hashem the way they did, the world would not be ready to receive the Torah. But it went in stages. And the reason why we now have permanence is not because we are necessarily greater than them, but rather because Hashem gave us the ability and the strength to do so. If you remember, we learned in the Ma'amar Basi Lagani, the 7 tzaddikim that drew the Shekinah down into the world, and the 7th was Moshe, who drew it down into the physical world, right? And over there, the Rebbe emphasizes that even though he was the one that actually accomplished the task, but it was only on the basis of the fact that he was standing on the shoulders of the giants that preceded him. So too, he superimposes that onto our generation, that even though we are the ones that are doing the last bit of work to bring the world to a state of perfection, it's not so much because of our greatness, but it's because of the fact that we're standing on the shoulders of giants.
Permanence.
Yes. But again, the fact that it was, on the contrary, if you would say that somebody fulfills the mitzvahs before it was given, that's in a sense even greater than somebody that's fulfilling a mitzvah because he's instructed. And the permanent effect is because Hashem has given the ability, has infused us with the strength to be able to fuse the godly and the mundane in a permanent way. A human being in his own right would not be able to accomplish that. And their quality was, that notwithstanding those limitations, they figured out how to serve Hashem nonetheless in the most powerful way, thus preparing the world for the advent of the giving of the Torah. But this is the difference between mitzvahs before the Torah was given and mitzvahs after the Torah was given. Before, the fusion was transient, the effect of the mitzvah in the physical world was transient. Afterwards, it becomes permanent. An item becomes holy once it's sanctified through a mitzvah. Hainu, what's the idea of this decree that the king imposed between the people of Rome and Syria? That the upper ones should not descend below and the lower ones should not go up above. In other words, there was no permanent fusion between the two realms. Therefore, all the mitzvahs that our forefathers fulfilled were like a scent, like a good scent, which passes, right? It's a pasuk in Shir HaShirim, I think it is, well, let's look at the reference here. It is in Shir HaShirim chapter 1, verse 3, it says, L'reach shemanecha toivim, shemen turak shmecha. Because of the fragrance of your goodly oils, your name is oil poured forth. Right? So there's the fragrance of the oil, and then there's the actual oil which is being poured forth. The fragrance is a reference to the mitzvahs of our forefathers. Fragrance is connected to mitzvahs. If you remember, we spoke about it. We had a long mimer in one of the previous shooting with the nose and so on and so forth. Right? So the fragrance is connected to mitzvahs. So the mitzvahs that the forefathers did were like a fragrance, which passes. It's a good scent, but you can't grab hold of it. It's there and then it's gone. A reference to the effect of the mitzvah of our forefathers. However, our mitzvahs are then shem and turak shmecha. It's more like oil, which is emptied from one vessel to another vessel, which means it's tangible, it's permanent. What does it mean? V'hainu, in the mitzvahs of that were performed before the Torah was given, since the essential drawing down of Hashem's very essence was not yet present in the world, was not yet drawn down, was not yet manifest through the event of giving of the Torah. Therefore, the mitzvahs that were performed before the giving of the Torah, their effect was transient. As the Rebbe Rashab explains, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe explains, that this concept of referring to mitzvahs, a reference to the connection between the upper realm and the lower realm being transient and not permanent, is not only a reference to the forefathers, but we also find that in Adam Rishon, the first man. Although, the Rebbe Rashab says that although Adam's serving Hashem was at a higher level than the forefathers, why? He qualifies that. Because he was a creation by the very hands of Hashem. Right? Even his physical body was fashioned by Hashem from earth. Unlike the forefathers or all humans since then that are born, their bodies are born, the soul comes from Hashem. But the body is born through the process of procreation, right? Whereas Adam, his physical body was fashioned by the hands of Hashem. Ubegan Eden, and not only was he fashioned by Hashem's very hands, but he was also where? In the Garden of Eden. So even though he was at such a high level, and he was in that sense, even at a higher level than the forefathers, nevertheless, his serving Hashem was also merely in the form of fragrance. It wasn't the permanent effect. The Rebbe says it very beautifully. To explain this idea, what's the anomaly here? Why is it so surprising that notwithstanding the fact that Adam Rishon was at such a high level, his serving Hashem was also transient? So the Rebbe adds an additional element which makes this even more surprising. That although he was fashioned by the hands of Hashem, nevertheless, his serving Hashem was also like a fragrance only. What's so surprising about this? From the perspective of the neshama, we're similar. We're equal. Why? As the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that the godly soul is apart from Hashem above. As it says in the pasuk, and he blew into his nostrils a soul of life. Where does that pasuk say? Where does that verse say? That verse is a verse in Bereshis, a reference to Adam. And that Alter Rebbe brings a proof that all our souls come from Hashem, because as it says, he blew into his nostrils a soul of life, and that's true for all men. And you, as we say in Brichas HaShachar, you blew it into me. This is all a quote from Tanya. As the Zohar states, one blows from his inside, as opposed to breathing. Blowing is more from the inside, more internal. That's why when you blow, you lose energy, because it comes from the inside of the person. Pirush means from his inside, from his innermost dimensions. So on the one hand, so the neshama, so the soul, you could say Adam Rishon and the forefathers were more or less, as it were, on the same level, because it comes from Chelek Elakav and Mal Mamish. Where was there a distinct difference between Adam and the forefathers? Umailas Adam Rishon, the special quality that Adam Rishon possessed was Shegam Mitzad Gufo Yitzir Kapav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That also from his body's perspective, his body too was fashioned by Hashem himself, by Hashem's hands himself, so to speak. Now, before we go on, I just want to quote you a Gemara. The Rebbe over here refers to Lamata Masar Tvach, Lamata Masar Tvach. The Talmud says in Tractate Sukkah, Masechta Sukkah, as follows. The first Mishnah says that a Sukkah whose walls are lower than 10 Tvachim, 10 fist width, what's it called? The measure of hand breadths is possible. It's not a proper Sukkah. Why? Because 10 hand breadths high is considered a separate domain, halachically. Where do we know? Where do we know this from? So it says the Gemara, Minolam. Where do we know this from? Itmar. We learned in a Memra, Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Chaviva, Maslam Kulu Seder Meid Kal Hai Zui Chlufi Rabbi Yechanan, Rabbi Yenason. It's either Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yechanan or Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yenason. They learned. They taught as follows. Orain Tisha. The Orain in the Holy of Holies that contained the two tablets was 9 handbreadths tall, as it says in the pasuk. Ama v'chetzi kemosei. It was 1.5 cubits high. How much is a cubit? 6 handbreadths. So 1.5 cubits is what? Is 9. The kapeirus tefach. The cover of the Aron was what? 1 handbreadth wide. So 9 plus 1 is 10. Then it says in the pasuk, that where did Hashem speak to Moshe from? From where did Hashem speak to Moshe? I will meet you there, and I will speak to you from on top of the cover of the Aron. The Tanya, we learned in the Baraisa, says the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi says, "May olam la yarda Shekinah LaMotta." The Shekinah never descended lower than 10 cubits. So even when Hashem came down to speak to Moshe, he remained above the kaperis, which is what? He remained above the cover of the Aron, which is, he remained just above, he hovered just above 10 handbreadths above the earth. Then the Gemara goes into the discussion, what do you mean, what about Moshe? Moshe ascended, so he says he ascended, but just below 10 tvachim. A whole discussion in the Talmud, below 10 tvachim, higher than 10 tvachim. The bottom line is, from here we learn that 10 handbreadths wide is considered a mechitza, a barrier. Halachically is considered a separate reshus, concerning a separate domain, concerning hitzav achnasa, concerning carrying from one domain to another domain on Shabbos. This is where we learn it from. But this is the reference that Rebbe always used to say, that the Eibishter should be revealed, we should draw down the Shekinah, lemata me'asara tfachim, lower than 10 handbreadths. What's this reference to lower than 10 handbreadths? This is the Gemara. That until Mashiach comes, the Shekinah always hovers just above ground, as it were. Just 10 cubits above. So what does it say by Adam Rishon, concerning Adam Rishon, Mamilas Adam Rishon, what was the special quality of Adam Rishon? Also, from his body's perspective, he was also fashioned by the hands of Hashem. His body being lower than 10 handbreadths, meaning very low down, was a created being by the hands of Hashem. And Hashem is higher than 10 handbreadths wide. So it comes out from here that by Adam Rishon, what did we have? We had the fusion of the higher and the lower, the spiritual and the physical, the godly and the mundane. This is the anomaly. This is what's so surprising here. That nevertheless, even though in this element he was different than the forefathers, where he had in himself, it would seem, this presence of godliness, lower than the 10 handbreadths wide, nevertheless, his serving Hashem was also merely in the form of a fragrance, meaning what? Transient. Why? Because even then, even though he had this element, nevertheless, it was prior to the nullification of the decree, which takes place through Matan Torah, when the very essence of Hashem could be drawn down, which is also the reference to the first word of the 10 Commandments, Anoichi, which stands for 4 words. It's an acronym for Ano Nafshik Savas Yehavis. I have taken my soul and I've written it in and given it away through the Torah. That is why, generally, the idea of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, is much higher than the condition of the world was, even at the beginning of creation, before Adam sinned with the eating from the tree of knowledge. And more about that, the Mitzvah Shem, tomorrow.